This is Decelony, and welcome to episode 25 of 90s Overlooked Underheard. Yeah, hi, welcome back. So in today's episode, we'll be looking at a pair of, I think, very different bands, very different albums, still from 1996. Both of these bands coming from Scotland. So in case you weren't in the UK in 1996, yeah, the music press, the wider media were all still very, very much obsessed with kind of Britpop. The preceding year, we'd had that kind of crazy number one battle between Blur and Oasis. And this wouldn't really dissipate until 97 when, you started to see a few kind of bands kind of take on a kind of a more post-Britpop role. I would guess the big album that would really signify the end of Britpop to me would be Radiohead's OK Computer. That's the best example I can think of. But yeah, away from the charts, there was lots more going on in kind of indie alternative scenes. And I think these are two great albums that are ripe for revisiting. So first up today, we have Long Fin Killie and their album Valentino, released on the 27th of May, 1996. So first, a little about Long Fin Killie. Yeah, they formed in kind of the first half of the 1990s. The kind of the leader of the band, the singer, multi-instrumentalist, was Luke Sutherland, who'd previously been in a fairly short-lived band called Fen. I do have an EP of theirs. But when Fen split, he formed Long Fin Killie around about 1994. And that band consisted of Luke, Colin Gregg on bass, David Turner on drums, and Phil Cameron on guitar. Yeah, I'm kind of flagging up Luke as the kind of de facto leader of the band because he had such a big role in it. He was the singer. He wrote all the lyrics. And he played a number of instruments, all of which got used at some point during Long Fin Killie's, recorded and live career. He played the violin, mandolin, bouzouki, dulcimer, saxophone. Very, very talented guy. So Valentino was actually the band's second album, and it was released on Too Pure, as all their other stuff was. Too Pure, in case you're unaware, were a very, very cool UK label, particularly active during the 90s and noughties. Yeah, and they helped really break a lot of really cool bands. PJ Harvey, Stereolab, Moonshake, Seafeel, McCluskey later in the 90s, Mouse on Mars, Electrolane. They had quite an impressive roster. So yeah, the band's first LP, Houdini, had been released the previous year in 1995 to some pretty great reviews. The single from that album was also a track called The Heads of Dead Surfers, which was very notable for having a guest vocal from Mark E. Smith of The Fall. Anyway, before I talk about Valentino, first of all, let's try and tackle the Long Fin Killie sound kind of head on, because it's quite dense, rich, very mazy music. Very difficult to describe, very unique, very complex. I would imagine technically demanding stuff to play. I think all the musicians involved were very, very proficient. Their music is crammed with these kind of jarring collisions of jazzy kind of drumming, very odd percussion, these kind of folky instruments that Luke Sutherland would play, popping in and out, these occasional violent slashing kind of guitar passages, all with this kind of very dub-focused kind of bass underpinning it. Yeah, really, really heavily layered music, which could go from this very kind of angular, abrupt, stop-start kind of feel into kind of, suddenly you could stretch out far more kind of spacier, moodier kind of pieces. As I say, very, very unique, I think, for that period. And at the centre is Luke Sutherland's voice, this kind of quite high, breathy, very forward voice. His words always very clear, very readable. And his lyrics very, very literate, dense with imagery, offhand kind of quotes and phrases dropped in, very jarring, very provocative. And I guess taking certainly all the instrumentation into account, you could probably quite happily kind of class this as post-rock, or certainly the post-rock of the day as it was then. The dubbiness, the texture, the experimentation, the way the kind of the songs flowed and developed and kind of explored an atmosphere. But I think if you're going to do that, then it also highlights kind of the inadequacy of post-rock as a kind of a meaningful description, because post-rock generally isn't this kind of lyrically dense. It certainly isn't as preoccupied with, inhabiting these kind of imagined characters in the way that Luke Sutherland does. Yeah, again, I think pretty unique. If you were going to look for any kind of precedent in terms of feel or in terms of approach to the way that they put music together, you could make a case for some hints of, A.R. Kane, that kind of dream pop, dubby sound that they had. But I also hear kind of bits of kind of the kind of the krautrocky, dubby experimentation of bands like Moonshake or possibly even Bark Psychosis. Anyway, onto the album itself, onto Valentino, and some key tracks. Yeah, the track Pele has this kind of chattering kind of soup of kind of guitar harmonics sprawling over this kind of really kind of gently nudging kind of dub bass. And this kind of violin begins to creep in around the edges of the vocal melody. Sutherland sings, sick of headcase, racist jibes, sick of deep-fried arteries. And he seems to be singing about someone who's kind of got a bit of a weight problem or is trying to kind of, inhabit a different character in their own private life. Yeah, he sings, the clothes that I have stowed away simply accentuate my weight. And as the song proceeds, the guitars gradually build weight towards the song's conclusion. Yeah, the track is this beautifully impressionistic kind of fractured character study. Yeah, very, very cool. Kitten Heels has this very jarring kind of clipped guitar chord pattern brushing up against these, clattery, busy percussion, very jazzy, almost kind of drum and bass, jungly kind of drums. And it just kind of hares along with these odd kind of plucked bass notes punctuating the song's kind of louder guitar sections. Again, Sutherland is kind of inhabiting another character. He sings the slightest whiff of leather and you've got a fetish. Yeah, this is it's almost kind of a cousin to the track Pele that I just talked about, but this is the kind of the jittery, jabbing, kind of fidgety counterpart to that kind of slightly languid feel of Pele. Yeah, another fantastic song. Yeah, Coward features this kind of sliding, shifting, kind of almost hypnotic, kind of strummed guitar pattern. And again, it's full of that really kind of maddeningly, upfront, forward percussion. But I think in this song, you hear something happen. It's kind of like if you're hearing kind of road noise or kind of, the noise of heavy machinery in the distance through the window. And initially you find it jarring and odd. But then it kind of enters your thought process and kind of, you find yourself just kind of incorporating it. That's what happens with this kind of very noisy, initially very distracting percussion in Long Fin Killie songs. The layering kind of gradually kind of eats it up and you kind of build this mantra type feel. Luke is kind of singing this breathy, kind of soothing, submerged melody all the way through this track. It's a stunning piece of music. Very subtle, very nuanced. It shifts slowly through its length. Yeah, quite a daring piece of music. Yeah, Girlfriend, again, more dubby bass, more of Sutherland's violin, really forceful here. And taking over where there would be lead guitars in some of the other sections of the song. The vocals here get distorted as well, and signal the arrival of this kind of louder, kind of crashing guitar passage. Yeah, again, you get this oddly strange, hypnotic tone which kind of forms out of what initially seems, a cacophony. And the track Matador, which is just masterful. It's a kind of it's a summation. It's kind of, it could be the prototypical Long Fin Killie song, utterly unique with these busy, again, drums, these lilting kind of soothing bass lines, the guitars gently kneading and pulsing, breathy, beautiful lyrics. Sutherland sings, Matador, thrown gourd wide open, every inch a macho swine. Yeah, Luke Sutherland has gone on to become an author. He's written several books, and his lyrics definitely have that kind of very literary feel. They're very dense, they're very interesting, and his knack at being able to kind of create a character for a song is quite unique, I think. Yeah, Valentino's a record I've kind of lived with and loved for 25 years plus, since it came out. So this is one that I would strongly recommend you chase up if you haven't heard it yet, because yeah, I think they're one of the great lost bands of the 90s. And moving on to today's second album, we have The Week Never Starts Around Here by Arab Strap, released on the 25th of November 1996. Yeah, another very interesting band from Scotland from this point in the mid-90s. Yeah, Arab Strap were from Falkirk and formed in around about 95 around the core duo of Malcolm Middleton on guitar, bass, keyboards, and Aidan Moffat on vocals and drums. Yeah, this would be their debut album, and it was the first of a run of recordings over a 10-year period, after which the band did disband in 2006. Yeah, they've reformed again in recent times, in 2016, in fact, 10 years after they initially called it quits, and they finally got to release another album as Arab Strap in 2021 with As Days Get Dark. Yeah, both Malcolm and Aidan released a string of solo material, both when they were with Arab Strap in their initial run and in the intervening period when the band were inactive. Malcolm's always released stuff under his own name, and he's also kind of got a pseudonym of Human Don't Be Angry. Aidan's released stuff under the name Lucky Pierre or L. Pierre. Yeah, for me, that first run of 3 albums that they recorded and released in the 90s are my favourite of their releases from that first iteration of the band. So that is The Week Never Starts Around Here, today's album, the follow-up, Philophobia, and their third record, Elephant Shoe. So the Arab Strap sound, yeah, it's almost kind of the polar opposite to Longfin Killie. It's very stark, very stripped back. It's got echoes of that kind of the spooky, kind of slightly monochrome dynamics of some of the early kind of US post-rock slowcore bands. Think Slint or possibly Codeine. But there's definitely a kind of a much darker, kind of folkier side that comes to the fore, partly because they're using such bare, kind of quite skeletal arrangements in a lot of their music. And yeah, that brings to mind some of their other influences, I think, which would be people like Will Oldham, his time with the Palace Brothers. But Arab Strap, their music, it reflects an entirely kind of British and entirely Scottish sensibility. And again, but in a different way to Longfin Killie, what could be kind of thought of as post-rock in some way or another is kind of, I think, capsized by the lyrical content of Arab Strap's music. It's unashamedly personal, very unfiltered, very confessional, yeah, unsparing, very matter-of-fact. Yeah, Aidan's obsessions are, personal failings and emotional ugliness, the kind of casual cruelty of love, sexual encounters, this kind of backdrop of drink and drugs and, very barren kind of transactional relationships in some cases. And, just the whole fallout of lives being lived, quite hedonistically with little regard or forethought. This album, their music kind of represents kind of, if you like, the flip side of this kind of, the sexed up hedonism of 90s Britpop. This is very grimy, grubby, down to earth. Before I start talking about tracks of the album, I think this is one of those albums that's a definite case of, a debut album being such a clear kind of statement of intent. All the things, all the elements that define the band are here immediately, fully formed. And whilst I think maybe this album isn't the best album that the band ever released, I think Philophobia, their second, might pip it for that. Its impact on me was strong enough that I feel this is the one that's worth talking about more. I think it may be slightly undervalued because of, the quality of some of the more accomplished albums they released after this one. But you can't deny that as a debut, the fully formed nature of the band almost immediately is impressive. But anyway, on with The Week Never Starts Around Here and some key tracks. So the opening trio of songs on the album, Coming Down, followed by The Clearing and Driving. Yeah, this is a real kind of tone-setting opening trio of songs, I think, all kind of marked up by these kind of dark, circling kind of guitar patterns and these spare, snapping drums. In the case of the clearing, they get, hugely blown out and distorted. And yeah, you get introduced to, Aidan Moffat's spoken word vocals, very thickly accented, very close-up feeling, very unsettling, flat, very troubled in some ways. Yeah, there is a strong imprint, I think, of Slint. But the one thing I think this music has less of is that trend of, riding the dynamics. And by that, I mean, Arab Strap seem much more content to kind of set and maintain a very singular mood and tone, and a sense of place and feeling. There's less kind of storytelling. There's less of that kind of tension that's kind of resolved through the dynamics of the song. They all feel kind of like they're kind of harking back slightly, like they're trying to document something that's happened that's unchangeable. Yeah, Arab Strap's music is very kind of light and dark. I see very little kind of transition from one to the other. And where the drama comes from kind of like, that stretched out tension in a band like Slint, I think in Arab Strap it comes from the kind of the lyrical shocks, the kind of all the kind of the things that Moffat serves up. Yet further on in the album we get I Work in a Saloon. A really interesting song on the album. It kind of replaces the drums with the kind of simplest of kind of drum machine backings. And the guitar is switched to an acoustic with a simple kind of picked, kind of a rolling folky pattern sliding from one chord up to another and back. With Moffat weaving this tale of kind of, barroom sexual conquests. Yeah, this is the kind of element of Arab Strap which opens up the kind of this kind of dark, kind of almost an urban kind of folky element of their sound. This is something that they could use as a counterpoint to the other types of song on the album. And it works very well. Yeah, and the album rides this kind of very, murky tone, but kind of comes alive, I believe, in one track, the big track. That is the first big Weekend. Yeah, this was famously used in a kind of Guinness TV advertising campaign. Right, the band weren't paid a lot, it was only about 5,000 quid they got out of it. But yeah, it features this kind of galloping little drum machine accompanying Moffat's tale of a very, very memorable weekend. I think some of the anoraks out there have pinpointed this too, 1996. Some of the football references in there suggest he's talking about the kind of the Euro 96 football tournament that was taking place in the UK that year. And again, like I Work in a Saloon, you get an acoustic guitar with quite a simple bass line. Yeah, it's a wonderful song, just this really dense kind of lyrical story, very grounded, but I think it's the quite kind of simple chorus that eventually comes in that kind of nails what this song is all about. It says, "Went out for the weekend, it lasted forever. High with our friends, it's officially summer." Yeah, for a song which covers such humdrum things as going to the pub, going out, getting drunk, watching The Simpsons, chatting with people in gardens, it's oddly, anthemic and life-affirming in a way that, a lot of their other songs were quite dark. Whereas this kind of has this very simple kind of unfettered kind of joy of just simple, unbridled hedonism. Yeah, like I said, as a debut album, I think this is great. I think Philophobia, their second album, did kind of top that. I saw them tour around about that time, and as a live band, yeah, they really kind of amped things up and gave things a whole kind of shot live. Whereas this is definitely one of those albums that's much more spare, much more controlled, much more contained, one for kind of listening to by yourself. So there you go. Yes, a pair of great albums from very, very different Scottish bands from 1996. Yeah, so I'll be continuing with this 90s Overlooked Underheard series, possibly a bit more regularly than I have been recently. It'd be quite nice, I think, now that we're kind of definitely down to the final 10 records in this list, to finish it up maybe by the end of the year, but don't hold me to that. Okay, that's it. Many thanks for watching, and double thanks if you've happened to have liked or commented along the way. Please come back. Join me again soon.